Joey Jones is the author of a brand new book, Behind the Badge. It's his second book with Fox Books. This one focuses on answering the call to serve on America's home front. It's about policemen and firefighters and the stories of their lives, some of whom Joey knows personally, in their call to serve. Joey, what's up, man? I want to talk about that with you here today, but I also want to work through what is a big weekend of news. But how are you? What are you doing? Are you sitting outside? Is this your new fancy Fox background?
So you like that, don't you? You know what? You know how fancy it is? I airdropped it to an iPad that's called Pete Hegseth's iPad is the name of it, and pulled this picture up in the background. So I got a little bit more technologically advanced today. I have a football field on the back of my property. It kind of came with it. I didn't pay for it. It's just there. And so I need to show it off, and nobody ever sees it. So we'll put it as a background.
The magic of television. It's a television screen, probably about a 96-inch monitor behind Joey that he's made to look like a background. Why is your iPad called Pete Hegseth's iPad?
Because Joey Jones doesn't get the Will Cain budget, Will. I don't have it. It's a 77-inch, not a 96-inch. And I had to beg, steal, and borrow pieces. The camera and everything came from Geraldo's Beach House. So all the boxes showed up, said Geraldo's Beach House. So it's
really?
Beg, steal, and borrow, man. That's what it is. Yeah.
They repurpose your home studios. That shows what happens when it's over. When it's over and you're not at Fox anymore, they come, they tear it down, and they send it to Joey Jones. He's got the remnants of Pete Hegseth and Geraldo Rivera in that home studio. All right, man. It's good to have you here today. I got about 5 stories I think we need to work through, and they've all broken in the past, really in the past day, and they're happening all across the world. Let's start on the economic front. Joey, let's start on the talks that there is an American and Chinese trade deal coming together. Markets have rallied. They're up about 1,000 points throughout the day, up over 42,000 Dow Jones Industrial Average. They're excited without the framework or the details necessarily. There are talks that the 145% tariff on China will be dropped to roughly about 30%. So we do have a little bit of detail. But I saw this tweet, Joey, that caught my attention. By a guy named Joe Wiesenthal, goes by the Stalwart on X, tweets about economic news. He says, the 2 biggest losers today. 1, people hoping for a Trump-led economic catastrophe. 2, members of the big chess party who thought the tariff announcement was some brilliant strategic plan that would reshape the global economy in a way that was beneficial to the United States. He kind of threads the needle there on saying, whatever this deal is, it undercuts the cheerleaders on both sides. What do you make of the potential for a deal between the U.S. and China?
This stuff is, it's not like you need to be a finance major to understand it, because it does affect, like there are a lot of people that have small businesses that rely on China to source their goods. I think that one thing we need to understand is we're never going to bring things like clothes back to the United States. There's just no way to produce those things in a way that fits our economy. It would be we'd have to hit dire straits, really, to be able to manufacture some things here in this country. We'd have to be desperate. And that is what it is. People that make T-shirts and clothing, it's just almost impossible to have something that blue-collar people can afford and make it here. I go above and beyond and spend a lot of money, actually, to get some of my suits made here in this country for that purpose, just to support manufacturing here. But that's not something everybody can afford. So I like the fact that he calls kind of both sides and says, listen, we're not going to be able to completely reshape this. But the truth is, our economy is 70% service related, which means up to 70% of our GDP could go away if we couldn't afford the conveniences that we pay for, the things we pay other people to do for us. So the need to bring manufacturing back here is huge. And I hope that is a part of the Trump economic plan. I think the tariffs and China specifically, you got to swing big to get little gains. And I think Trump understands that. Maybe real estate deals is why he understands that. I don't know. But you got to go massive. I mean, 145% tariff to wake China up, because the detail and the win is in the fine print. Because I can't remember who was quoted, but in the article I just read, it said that the U.S. expects and is pressuring for non-monetary hurdles for U.S. exports in China to be cleared. And so it's things like China may mandate that to be a company moving some of its product into China, they own some of it. China is set up, a lot of people don't understand this. It is a communist country in most of China. But then you have these little enclaves called capitalist economic zones. And these are your bigger cities, and it's basically where you go tour if you're a tourist. And in those areas, there's a miniature capitalist system that operates there. That's why American companies can partake in their economy. But there's a lot of Chinese government oversight and control. And so what are these non-monetary hurdles and blockades that they're talking about, and how are they being mitigated? That might be the meat and potatoes of any kind of deal. Because the truth is, a few months ago, there was a 0% tariff on U.S. goods going to China. But the Trump administration and many in government would say it was still an incredibly expensive thing to do because of those non-monetary blocks and hurdles. So what are they, and how are we mitigating them through this deal?
And I would say there was other non-monetary issues to be dealt with through a negotiation with China. Like, what are we going to get done when it comes to, for example, fentanyl? Like, are we going to see some participation with the Chinese Communist Party to control the export of fentanyl to places like Mexico, to be pressed into pills and shipped to America? That's also an issue when it comes to India, which is also in the trade negotiation pipeline. Yeah, I think the thing you said that really resonates with me the most is anyone that's ever paid attention to Donald Trump, or for that matter, understands pretty much the blueprint for a hard negotiator is maximum ask, compromise in the middle when it's done. So 145% wasn't sustainable. Yeah, now, was it designed to hurt China? Yes. And to bring them to a pressure point? Yes. And there are indications that that was happening inside the Chinese economy. We've seen stories and details about Chinese plants and worker strikes already beginning to take place. But that's designed to bring them to the table. It isn't designed, as you point out, to be making Nikes in America. I think, and I can't envision what this all looks like, and I'm not sure the Trump administration can, but you set the playing field. You deregulate, you lower taxes, you create foreign investment in the United States, which we've seen a ton of that, and you hope that the next manufacturing boom is in Louisiana and not in Beijing.
Yeah.
You hope that when there's AI data centers, AI houses, AI warehouses, AI plants, whatever it is that is the next economy is centered here. And hopefully along with that is some semblance of jobs. Now, we may not ever recoup the jobs of when we were, making everything in America, tires and steel and shoes and shirts and everything. But we can't go backwards. We can only position it forwards and think what manufacturing looks like going forward. So if we're at 30%, there's one more thing. With Trump on any of these deals, you can't critique a meal while the chef is cooking. You have to wait to the end, right? And that's the nature of news. That's the nature of politics.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of sports, right? Anything. And honestly, that's part of the fun. But it all in the end is worthless commentary if what we end up with at the end of the meal is something very different. And in this case, I just watched a terrible movie, Joey. Terrible. Would not advise it. Tried to have a family movie. And the only reason I watched it is because Vince Vaughn was in it. And he still retains Vince Vaughn's in this. I think I want to watch this. It's called Nona's on Netflix. And it's about these Italian grandmas that he has this restaurant concept around. And there are recipes, but there's scenes in the movie. And again, I think stick in my head doesn't mean it's a good movie. Like, how much of this do you use? She goes, it comes from the heart. What I'm getting at is how an Italian grandma kind of cooks on the fly from the heart. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure Trump knows the complete recipe, and I'm not sure he has a grand vision. So we don't know what the meal will look like, but we do know that we're in the midst of the making of the meal as we speak. And I'm not sure it does totally undercut the big chess vision of trying to reimagine the U.S. economy.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think small gains go a big way in our government. I mean, this is a tactic that the Democrats use. And let me give you an example. If Republicans want to spend $0 more on the budget, and the Democrats want to spend $500 billion on the budget, and the narrative is we expect them to find compromise, the Democrats just ask for another trillion. If you've got 0 and a trillion, what is in the middle? 500 billion. Democrats win. That's why in the government shutdowns of old, when it was Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell, it seemed like the Republicans would always lose because the Democrats had a playbook for that. It seems like Trump is using a similar playbook on these other countries. Hey, you don't want to give us anything? That's fine. I'm going to shut down everything or ask for everything, and then we'll see where you go. And has it worked on China? I mean, sometimes you can manufacture a crisis and then also manufacture the win to that crisis. So if we went back to February before any of this tariff trade war started, technically we're in a better place. Our tariffs on them were lower and their tariffs on us were zero. But what are those, unspoken or undefined wins? Are they doing something on fentanyl? Have we at least, is there other pressures that this has brought to them that's tampering maybe their cyber attacks and some of the other things, the intellectual property that they seem to steal without disregard? Are there other things that the Trump administration has an eye on and is getting out of this and use this very public trade war to get their attention? That's my hope and my thought. I don't think it's chess. I think it's common sense. And that's why people voted for Trump, because he speaks in common sense terms.
Let's hit a couple of different pieces of news and flashpoints across the globe that were notable over the weekend. India and Pakistan, who were probably best described going beyond the skirmishes of the past 80 years, looked like they were kind of pressing towards war over Kashmir. It's obviously a very scary proposition because they're both nuclear powers. This weekend it was announced they accomplished a ceasefire. At the same time, Joey, there's talk that this week Zelensky will sit down or plans to or is willing to engage in a sit down with Vladimir Putin. This is Trump heads overseas. This is two big flashpoints, wars that we would love to see come to peace. And it's a big step forward in both instances, Joey.
Absolutely it is. With Pakistan and India, I'd say most Americans aren't really well versed on that. And I'd say that I'm not to the extent that I need to be giving expert analysis on it. But I'll tell you this, Pakistan is not someone you can ever trust. And India, it depends. And so I'd say we probably have a little bit better relationship with India than we have in a while. I know that J.D. Vance has a good relationship with the leadership there. But we don't need another war breaking out. We don't need another war that we've either got to pick a side or are married to a side and have to back it whether we want to or not. So for me, it's more about where does President Trump lead on that, because that's the first one that has happened under his watch. All the other ones that we're dealing with right now, he inherited. And he only inherited from Biden. He didn't hand them to Biden. They didn't exist from 2016 to 2020. They exist now. We're talking Israel, what's happening with the Houthis. We haven't even talked about that because that's old news now. Our own ceasefire with the Houthis, and then what's happened in Ukraine and Russia. And to the extent that J.D. Vance or President Trump played a role, seeing a ceasefire between two countries that are known to play both sides of the Axis and allies, seeing a ceasefire there is a good thing.
Meanwhile, Trump posted this on Truth Social, Joey, about the release of Edon Alexander, the last living American hostage in Gaza. He says, I'm happy to announce that Edon Alexander, an American citizen who has been held hostage since October of 2023, is coming home to his family. I'm grateful to all those involved in making this monumental news happen. It's a step in good faith towards the United States and the efforts of its mediators, Qatar and Egypt, to put an end to this very brutal war and return all living hostages and remain to their loved ones. Hopefully, this is the first of those steps necessary to end this brutal conflict. I look very much forward to that day of celebration. It should be that day might be today, Joey.
Yeah, this is big news. I mean, this is bringing an American home. And that's what the Trump administration has done for the last 3-4 months. I mean, we've seen Americans come home from a lot of places that we didn't expect. We wake up one morning, there's a headline of someone many Americans didn't know was trapped somewhere and imprisoned somewhere. But in Gaza, especially with the politics that have surrounded Israel's offensive in Gaza, there were moments where we didn't think we'd ever get another American home, because that's the only point of leverage it seems like Hamas has. And it seems like now that they are very desperate. So perhaps Israel, maybe they were right all along that you have to meet fire with fire. I think that's absolutely true. I hope that the entire war there comes to an end, because there are innocent people. There are innocent people that identify as Palestinian. There's not a Palestine. There never was since Israel was created. But there are people that live in Gaza that are Palestinian and have suffered tremendously because Hamas started this war. We want it to come to an end, but the most important thing to me is that Americans are brought home and kept safe. That is our responsibility, and I'm glad to see the Trump administration picking that responsibility up and saying it out loud.
Yeah, that will be a moment. I mean, I don't know who will get the interview with Edon Alexander. Of course, I would love to on the Will Cain Show, but I mean, to hear about what the last 2 years have been like, year and a half have been like for Edon Alexander would be incredible.
Torture.
Incredible.
I mean, torture.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we need to hear those stories. We absolutely need to hear exactly what that was like in Gaza. Let me bring back in Two-A-Days Dan here for a moment. So during the middle of the show, we communicate often by text. One of my bosses said, Will, it's interesting how you're often on your phone when you do the Will Cain Show. And I'm like, well, I'm not like bored. We text and we control a lot of the show and the elements by text. And I got a text from Dan as you and I were talking, said, I said, you are so wrong. It's so good. At first I was like, is he talking about the U.S.-China trade deal? It's so good. And then I realized he's talking about this movie on Netflix that I just talked about, Nonas. Dan, you're here to stand for Nonas?
I am, man. It was so good. My wife and I watched it on Saturday. I back it so hard.
Come on.
It was heartfelt. It had the grandma angle. They had great food to look at. Oh, man, I loved it. My mom hated it too, but I loved it.
You know why? Here's why we watched it. I'll give you 3 reasons. We wanted a family movie. Now, I'll be interested to see what Joey, how he feels about this, because he's actually been in action, but I can't explain it. But action's relaxing for me, Joey. Like thrillers and violence, I can't explain it. And I'm not here to say it's good or it's bad, but like mob movies,
you don't have to figure it out. That's what it is. It's just, you don't have time to try to figure. You just sit there and watch. You're being entertained. That's all it is.
So like Den of Thieves, love it. Mobland, love, it's Mobland, with Tom Hardy. I'm watching that. Love it. The Last of Us, I'm watching that. I really like it. But I can't, my wife is the opposite. She's like, I don't want to hear gunfire and all of this, before I go to bed. She's like, I'll have insomnia.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll sleep like a baby. I will totally zone out. That's what it is for me. I totally zone out. I don't scroll my phone. I don't do anything. I zone out on those types of movies. So, but we needed a family movie today. So this looked like a family movie. 1, 2, Vince Vaughn. Still in on Vince Vaughn. 3, you're right. The food in the preview looked good. And 4, I'll give you a 4th. They had that Billy Joel song in the preview. And boy, they know how to do previews with bottle of red, bottle of white, and I'm like, okay, this looks like this will be a nice hour and a half. And Dan, come on. It's not compelling. It's not funny.
But it's based
good.
It's based on a true story. There's a real restaurant in Staten Island. The whole thing is true. It happened. And I feel like you have to have experienced an Italian Nona's cooking in real life to kind of get that full experience and immerse yourself in that movie.
I mean, I've had good Italian, but Joey and I come from the South, and that's not really.
Yeah, that's
Italian was like Pizza Hut.
I bet it's kind of like, it was. Blockbuster and a Pizza Hut. I mean, that was Friday night. That was spending big money when I was growing up. Like, Mom and Dad would go to Blockbuster, then we'd go across the street to Pizza Hut, and that was an Italian dinner and entertainment, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Joe,
you know what I did this?
Cheese sticks, get some chicken wings.
Oh boy, it was fancy when we went to City. Went down closer to Dallas and got some Olive Garden. Then we were really rocking and rolling with some Italian.
Listen though,
when you're there, your
Olive
family.
Garden in the '90s. Olive Garden in the '90s was a lot better than Olive Garden now. All these young kids that talk trash about Olive Garden, they used to make the pasta there. It used to be a lot better food. I know it wasn't homemade food. It's like when you Northeasterners think that the Cracker Barrel is how we cook down here, and it's like, no, it's not bad, but that's not how we cook.
But it is pretty good. Don't dog on Cracker Barrel. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I said it's not bad. It's not how we cook.
You know how we cook? You know what I did this weekend, Joey? We had a big crawfish boil. I'd say about 200 people, 100 people, at least 100 people. And Joey, do you know Daryl Dodd? Do you know the country singer Daryl Dodd? He was there. He's friends.
No, I don't.
You ever heard Things Are Fixing to Get Real Good or Pearl Snaps or My Tony Llamas? These are songs you'd like. Things Are Fixing to Get Real Good. Daryl was there. Daryl played a little bit. But we did 200 pounds of crawfish and, potatoes and corn and all that. And it's such a great, it's back in my hometown, and when I'm at things like that, that's when I was like, Dan came to Texas last week and he was like in downtown Dallas. I'm like, that's great. But like, this is where I wish you were. We're out in a field with a gigantic pot of crawfish.
That's right. The first thing I told him was Fort Worth is better than Dallas. I mean, you would at least, like as far as a visiting experience, you would agree with that, right? Like, the stockyards, like it feels more Texas. You know what I mean? Not better as in if you're living in one or the other, because there's a big rivalry, but just as someone who's visiting the area. But the other thing, too, I wanted to ask, so if you're telling him his first pair of cowboy boots need to be Lucchese's, then chances are you don't suck the heads on your crawfish either, right? Like that's a little bit too,
I do.
That's a little bit too redneck.
One out of every five. One out of every five.
One out of every. Can't get too much of that. Okay. No. A little bit more legitimacy here then.
I mean, if you're going to buy your first sports car, you might as well get a Ferrari. I mean,
that's fair.
That's Lucchese.
I get it. They're great boots. I wouldn't
want to get them dirty though. So I need.
Let me tell you something, Dan. I buy my wife Lucchese's, and then I wear like Justin's, maybe like Tacovas if I'm going to go way up above and beyond. But my boots, I got to be able to I'm rough on stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't take those ostrich
you have your dress boots.
Jump on the side.
You have dress boots.
That's true.
And you have
That's true.
you have pasture boots. All right, one more question for you, Joey, on movies before we go back to the news. I'm seeing this movie preview, and I kind of want to watch it. And my son said to me, he brought it up. So I'm like, which at this point, my son, who's 17, if he starts saying he's interested in something and it's good, all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, maybe this is, I'm onto something. Have you seen this movie Warfare or heard about this movie Warfare?
I've heard about it for a while. People have asked me about it for a month or two.
Oh, I'm curious what you have to say. It's about a SEAL team in Iraq who gets pinned down. But what everybody's saying about it is it's not Hollywooded up. Like it is non-glamorous, visceral portrayal of warfare. And I don't know, like people said that about the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan as well when it came to storming the beach of Normandy. I haven't watched it, but I haven't watched Warfare. I've watched Saving Private Ryan, obviously. But I kind of want to. I'm gonna have to do it without my wife. But I was just curious if you agree with what I'm hearing about it. That it's kind of like, the closest portrayal.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to watch it. I mean, so I had a personal connection to Lone Survivor, American Sniper, 12 Strong. I had friends out there involved in making the movie or friends that were portrayed in the movie. So I went to those premieres and watched them. And there were moments in them that you could see all the Hollywood, and there were moments in them that were pretty raw and real. I've heard the exact same thing you've heard about this Warfare. I've had a lot of people with credibility say, hey, I saw a premiere in D.C., I saw a premiere here, and they really haven't described it to me, just said how good it was. So I'll probably end up watching it. I mean, I took some time off from those movies for a little while. One, because so many of them came out so quickly, and two, every now and then you got to get your mind out of that, and, it's okay to just live life today. I'll tell you, just since you're on this topic, the movie that a lot of people bring to me is like Hurt Locker. And it's the best way I can explain to you my thoughts on these. Yeah. And it's like Hurt Locker as a movie, I think it's fantastic. I really do. And let me explain to you why. The things that happen in Hurt Locker, the things that actually make my butthole pucker, like actually make me worry that I'm going to die with this bomb, you would never understand it because you don't understand it's quiet. There's no action around. I'm going to put my hands into this dirt. And if that's a pressure release instead of a pressure switch, the moment I put my hands in there and clear the dirt, I'm blown up. There's no way to portray that to you without sight and sound and making it over the top. So they go to Hurt Locker and they make these scenarios over the top so you can feel that intensity that I feel when everything seems peaceful but is about to explode, literally. And I think war movies are like that. Like, it's not that Hollywood's trying to go over the top. It's that you're seeing it, almost in two dimensions. You're not able to smell it and taste it and feel that pressure of I may die. So they have to blow things up in a way that makes you understand the severity of the situation. And so I'm anxious to see this movie because I want to see how they did it. Maybe there's more first person point of view. I'm not sure, but that's what was really good about Lone Survivor was you felt like you were Marcus Luttrell sometimes, like with the way they did the camera. They used one of those small red cameras when they first came out. And so like with the advent of technology, we're going to get we're going to be in video games with movies before too long. That's really what it is. We're going to be able to decide which way we look in a movie. Like that's where we're going. And so combat movies are going to be the first ones that take us there.
So obviously, for anyone that doesn't know, Joey knows what he's talking about. He's a Marine EOD, so Hurt Locker basically is the closest we've seen from a movie portraying what he did for a living. And I loved Hurt Locker. Of course, what do I know? But, Joey, I remember I did an interview about a year ago, probably with David Bellavia, won Medal of Honor, and him talking to me about those moments when he cleared that building, the instance that got him the Medal of Honor. You talking about it being movies in two-dimensional. And of course, like I almost feel like we need to say this, but it's, of course movies don't approximate what you guys have experienced. But talking about that three-dimensional sense, I remember David telling me on this show, like the smell of blood. Like, it's like you can smell blood. And he's like, smell is one of the senses in war that you can never get in a movie that is actually a huge factor. Like, he's like, he was clearing that building. Of course, he didn't know when he went room to room if there was a guy, but he said, I could smell a guy. I could smell that he hadn't taken a bath or whatever in the next room, or I could smell blood if there was a guy that was injured. And that three-dimensional nature of course, of life, but that is enhanced in war is what you're talking about. And I imagine we can never capture.
We had this phenomenon. Every time I blew something up or got blown up, I could taste sulfur inside my mouth, and I've been able to talk to somebody. I don't know if it was from the explosion, because it's a part of. There's so many chemicals. Like most of those chemicals are like ammonium nitrate and a fuel oxidizer, like maybe diesel fuel or maybe even aluminum powder. So there was a lot that was put into the air that you could probably taste. But the other side of it was the concussion into my mind, basically the miniature concussion I got every time I blew something up. Was that actually where the taste was coming from? And I've never had a chance to talk to maybe a brain scientist about that, but there was we all hypothesized in one direction or the other that, some guy said, hey, I can taste that's ammonium nitrate, that's info. Another guy, I know that's anal, I can taste it. And my suspicion was always, no, it's the damn shockwave that just went through your head that's exciting your different senses. But it's absolutely true. And if you ever read David Bellavia's Medal of Honor citation, it's one of the most raw and straightforward ones I've ever heard. I mean, he literally decided, he has to go to a knife instead of a gun to kill these people so that it doesn't make the other person in the next room aware. He's slipping and sliding on the blood of the person that he's killing. It's insane. There's a reason why he got the Medal of Honor. But it's the type of combat you see in Saving Private Ryan, and that's what makes it so stand out, because our war was bombs. That was our war.
All right, meanwhile, back to the news. This big weekend for Trump now has been extended to this weekend, or to this morning, when he suggests he's going to take on prescription drugs and bring down the price of prescription drugs. And Joey, this moment that I referenced earlier is the money sound, of course, that could only come from Donald Trump. Watch.
I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine who's a businessman, very, very, very top guy. Most of you would have heard of him. A highly neurotic, brilliant businessman, seriously overweight, and he takes the fat shot drug. And he called me up, and he said, President, he calls me, he used to call me Donald, now he calls me President, so that's nice respect. But he's a rough guy, smart guy, very successful, very rich. I wouldn't even know how we would know this, but because he's got comments. President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88. And in New York, I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on? I'll tell you.
There he is talking about the price of Ozempic, which, by the way, we've done that story on both the television and digital versions of this program. Yeah, it's not working. And I assume they're good friends, the kind of friend that you can say that to. And it's crazy. Like Ozempic and Wegovy and all these drugs are so expensive over here and so comparatively cheap over in Europe. Now, I don't know, Joey, what President Trump can do, and we're going to spend the day figuring this out, but what he can do. Mark Cuban's debating that it's the middlemen in the prescription drug market that are actually the ones jacking up the price, but how we can bring prescription drugs down. And I'll tell you something, Joey, I'm fortunate. This isn't a big part of my life. I don't have a lot of needs when it comes to pharmaceuticals. I don't take them. It's pretty removed from my life, but I know for a lot of Americans, that's just not the case. We know how many Americans are taking prescription drugs.
No, I think there's multiple layers. It's number one, we live in a country where the medical field in this country treats symptoms, not causes. That's why we have such a dependency on pharmaceuticals. Hey, your blood pressure's high. Let's give you nitro to bring your blood pressure down. Not let's solve why your blood pressure's high. Like, it's just that's the way our medicine works. And I think that's part of the RFK phenomenon is now that information is available, people care and they look and are like, hey, some of this may be good or bad, but it's like I'm going to treat myself in a way they were doing it 1,000 years ago rather than in this way that says treat the symptom. And I think maybe that'll drive at least some competition. But as far as these prescription drugs go, the way the government can interfere in how this price setting happens is the government can say, we pay for 28% of all drugs and we do it with Medicare, Medicaid, and other programs, and we're going to tell you we're not paying more than a certain amount for these prescription drugs. And so the reason why a lot of people are saying we're not sure if the president has much power is what power does the president have to tell a private company what they can charge a private company, meaning like an insurance company, for a product? And so I don't know what that is. I'm not in that part of our government. But I think the fact that he's at least talking about it and that there are some levers he can pull that may be challenged legally, but in the interim, help people out a little bit. I mean, that's what you want from your president. And also, just to go back to that soundbite, what this is called an anecdote. He heard from somebody what they are paying in their specific instance or situation for something that millions of Americans are affected by. The more that we have access to information that's true and not true, the more I go back and rely more on anecdote than I do anything. You talk about statistical data. I mean, what did Mark Twain say? Stats, and more lies. Every medical research study out there is paid for by somebody who has an interest. So like, hey, 2 glasses of wine are good for you a day. Well, that was paid for by the American Grape Growers Association. So the more that we realize statistical information really is full of lies, the more anecdote matters to me. This person I love and care about and know has had this experience. That matters. And I don't mind a president that gets some of his priorities from these anecdotes. That's actually talking to people, and that's more than most of them will do.
That's a really interesting point. You do cover a lot of anecdotes, powerful anecdotes, in your new book, Behind the Badge. Talking to first responders of every stripe, firemen, police. It's answering the call to serve on America's home front and what compels these people to do this for a living. And some, as you talk to, I think it's a firefighter that give up other opportunities, lucrative opportunities in life to do something else in business, but choose to do this.
Yeah, just to tell you a little bit about it, the fireman you're talking about is my brother-in-law, Keith Dempsey. His dad lived across the street from Arthur Blank down on Paces Ferry in Atlanta, ran an advertising firm that was incredibly successful. Sent Keith to business school at the University of Georgia. Like he says, like any good frat boy, he got a 4-year degree in 5 years, but he graduated. And so when he graduated, he went to his dad and said, Dad, thanks for the education, but I want to go back and be a fireman like I've been working at in my summers and off time since Explorers in high school. He gave up financial wealth because he saw, because he's a very smart person, an opportunity to leave an impact in his community and his city as a fireman and now as a fire chief. And this book is full of people like that. I could go to FDNY and interview people that were there on 9/11 or at the Oklahoma City bombing and get some really compelling stories that would be easy to market and people would want to hear about. But the purpose of this book, and the reason why I didn't do that, is that these are people in big towns and small towns. These are people in the Baltimore County SWAT, Northwoods, Maine game warden whose job was search and rescue to find people that had drowned, find people that had gotten lost. He actually had to use his weapon in the line of duty, and the only game warden ever had to do it. Sheriff Mark Lamb out west, the things he did to keep young men out of jail and to help them reform their lives. My buddy Vince Vargas, who was Border Patrol search and rescue after being an Army Ranger. He's a Mexican-American. And just the way that he experienced racism from the Mexican side. Hey, who are you? You're turning on your people kind of thing. And he's like, no, I'm an American is what I am, and we have laws here. And to just go through the compassion and the turmoil. My buddy Justin Heflin, Indiana State Trooper. We went to war together in Afghanistan as Marine EOD techs. He becomes an Indiana State Trooper inspired by his dad, who was a Marine and a cop. He's on a patrol one night as a trooper gets a call to a fatal vehicle accident, turns his car around, heads that way, a kid speeds by him. So he has to pull that kid over. By the time he finishes that stop, he's no longer going to the fatal accident. Come to find out, the fatal accident was his dad. And just the way that God works in our lives and the way these individuals have seen the worst, the absolute worst that we do to each other and the worst that happens to us, and that they keep doing it for 20 years or 30 years. In combat, our trauma hits us in the face. It's all at once. It happens in 6 months. We come home. For these guys and gals, their battlefield is what they live in every day. They go through an intersection to take their kids to school that they scraped the kid up off the pavement last week. And to get inside their minds on how they make sense of that and how it doesn't turn them into just this benign zombie of a person, because they all have passions and they love their family and they still care. You can learn a lot from them. And there's a lot I learned from talking to all of them and writing about their story.
How do they, after writing this book and talking to so many different people on firefighters, policemen, border patrol, SWAT, it is a great question. The callousness caused over years can make you a cynic or a misanthrope. Maybe that's a good word for it. I mean, I'm not saying it does. You could see how it would or could do that. Like you said, constantly seeing negativity and the worst of people. That's how life works, right? Like my dad was a plaintiff's attorney, right? Small town plaintiff's attorney. A lot of our conversations and the way that he saw the world was through like liability and the worst that could happen. He would tell me stories about hunters. Every time I hunt, Joey, do you know what I think about? The little space heater, the propane space heater, because my dad told me stories about the pilot light going out. And I always heard stories about the pilot light going out and guys dying in a deer blind because it's filled up with, gas. And I feel like those stories were always around me. And I don't walk through the world scared, and I probably just have a different mindset than him. But like, something I never do? I don't ride motorcycles, Joey, because my dad was like always telling me the horrific stuff he saw from guys that rode motorcycles. Like a car wreck's bad.
Yeah.
A motorcycle accident is horrific. So like, it's just like,
that's right.
Whatever your life experience is just informs so much. And these guys, to your point, man, they see the worst on a day in, day out basis. I don't know how they do that psychologically.
And to answer your question, your first question is how do they? And there's multiple answers to that. Number one, some of them don't. And there's such a high suicide rate among police and fire specifically right now. It needs to be addressed. How does it get addressed? Well, for our military, we've had a 20-year national campaign that stems from Applebee's giving you a free meal to, the Secretary of the VA being more important than he's ever been, on the country saying, hey, let's take care of our veterans and let's acknowledge the trauma they go through and the mental health crisis that's result from it. We don't have anything like that for our first responders, and their trauma never stops. So how do they deal with it? They do it at a grassroots level. They do it inside the fire hall, and they do it inside the precinct. They do it on the SWAT team. They do it among each other. They're figuring it out for themselves. And we just expect them to do it. You know why we expect them to do it and why I can say that is because when your house catches on fire and when somebody hits you head on, you expect them to be there to save your life, to save your house, to punish the person that hurt you, to make things right again. You are entitled. You walk around saying they will be there. I pay taxes. They better come do that. What we never stop and think about is when we hear this story about 3 college kids in the Pacific Northwest being gruesomely murdered, who showed up to clean that up and to do that investigation? How many of those men that were in that house have a young daughter in college somewhere? Like we don't even stop to connect those dots. But what we will do is not Fox so much, but some networks will report every time a cop has to pull his sidearm and use it in self-defense or to stop someone from hurting somebody else. And we want to sharpshoot every move they made. Every time that something negative happens, it blows out of proportion. But we don't have enough time in the day to talk about every time something heroic happens, because that's just our worst days in life are another day on the job for them. And I'm not preaching and scolding people, but read about it, learn about it, have some appreciation for it. I bring my own personal examples into it. The night that my dad died in my house and I'm doing CPR on him, and one of the firefighters that responded to help keep his body alive for a day, sees me a week later and comes up and says, "Hey, how's your dad doing?" I said, "No, he didn't make it." And you just see that look on his face, like it overcame him. Like, man, I failed. But also, hey, that's just another day on the job. He might have had 2 other calls that day, just like that. And just to go through some of these things, and this is not a rebuke of defund the police or a big back the blue. This is a raw, unfiltered conversation. Some of these guys and gals have gotten through it. Quite honestly, some of them haven't, and they're honest about that. But to answer your question, every single one of them believes that their job is a mission, and that mission is more important than their own peace of mind. And that's quite a thing to know that there are people like that in this world. Yeah,
that's incredible. Behind the Badge, Answering the Call to Serve on America's Home Front. It's by Joey Jones. It's out now by Fox News Books, and I encourage you to go check it out. Incredible stories. Incredible conversation as always, Joey. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thanks, brother. Good luck in everything you're doing, man.
Okay. All right, buddy. We'll see you soon. There he goes, Joey Jones.